Why your hair is sending you a warning signal. If your hair is going gray, thinning, or falling out suddenly, this is generally not simply the result of getting older. It could be one of the earliest warning signals that something deeper is affecting your body from the inside. Fatigue, abdominal fat, difficulty concentrating, disrupted sleep, and chronic inflammation are all frequently connected to one another. They often share the same underlying root cause. And what researchers have discovered has genuinely surprised even the scientific community. Some gray hairs have actually regained their pigmentation after a person's stress levels decreased significantly. This process is far more reversible than most people have ever been led to believe. But here is the uncomfortable part. One of the primary drivers of accelerated graying and hair loss has almost nothing to do with your genetics. In this lesson, I'm going to show you what is actually happening inside your body and how to help it repair itself before these changes become significantly harder to reverse. Your hair follicles are more than decoration. It is important to understand that your hair follicles are not simply passive tubes sitting on the surface of your scalp. They are among the most metabolically active structures in your entire body. They consume energy at a remarkable rate. They are constantly cycling, constantly producing pigment, and constantly building new keratin from the raw amino acids you consume through your diet. That is precisely why they are typically the first system to break down when something deeper goes wrong inside you. Think of your hair the way coal miners used to think of canaries. When the canary detected a gas leak, it would signal to the miners that something dangerous was happening underground. Gray hair and thinning hair work the same way. They are not the problem itself. They are the signal pointing toward the problem. When your body is forced to make decisions about where to send its energy and raw materials, hair growth is one of the very first things it deprioritizes. That is because the number one priority of the human body is survival. Your body does not care whether your hair looks healthy in photographs. It cares whether you survive today and survive the week. So when you notice thinning or graying, what you are often actually looking at is your body redirecting its resources away from non-essential systems, because something more urgent is pulling at those resources from beneath the surface. That something is almost always one of four interconnected things: oxidative stress, cortisol overload, mitochondrial decline, and chronic inflammation. And in real life, all four of these are feeding each other in a relentless, vicious loop. This is not about appearance. It is about what is genuinely happening underneath the surface of your health. What the research actually shows. A landmark study out of Harvard, published in the journal Nature in 2020, mapped precisely what happens to the stem cells that produce hair pigment when an organism goes through acute stress. What the researchers found was striking in its clarity. Stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, which floods the area surrounding the hair follicle with norepinephrine. That norepinephrine essentially forces the pigment-producing stem cells to fire all at once, depleting and burning themselves out permanently. This is why people who go through a divorce, the death of someone close, a financial collapse, or another major life crisis often appear to have aged dramatically within just 6 months. That is not a metaphor or a figure of speech. That is the literal biological process of their stem cell reserves being exhausted under extreme stress. Then in 2021, a wider and equally significant study published in the journal eLife went even further. Researchers mapped pigment distribution along individual human hair shafts with remarkable precision. Since hair grows approximately 1 centimeter per month, a long strand of hair effectively serves as a biological timeline of what has been happening inside a person's body over months and years. In this study, researchers cross-referenced that timeline with participants' own personal stress journals. What they found was extraordinary. The lighter and darker sections along individual hairs aligned almost perfectly with periods of high and low stress in those people's lives. Some hairs went gray during a job loss or the end of a relationship, then actually regained pigment once the stress subsided. That study represented the first solid human evidence that graying is not always a one-way road. But it also tells you something genuinely unsettling. Your stress, even the low-grade chronic variety that you have grown so accustomed to that it no longer even registers consciously, is showing up on your scalp in real time. The cellular mechanism driving this process is worth understanding in plain terms. Hydrogen peroxide builds up inside the follicle. Antioxidant enzymes drop. The pigment-producing enzyme tyrosinase shuts down. Research published in the FASEB journal shows that gray follicles are essentially being bleached from the inside by their own peroxide because the cells lose their ability to clear it efficiently. And the critical thing to understand is that the exact same oxidative process is happening simultaneously in your skin, your joints, your gut lining, and your blood vessels. Your hair just shows it first because hair follicles are so metabolically demanding. The evidence for reversal. There is a separate trial I want you to know about, published in the journal Aging in 2021. It was an 8-week study in which participants followed a relatively straightforward protocol combining dietary adjustments, sleep optimization, breathing practices, moderate exercise, and a selection of targeted nutrients. Researchers measured biological age using DNA methylation analysis, which is currently one of the most reliable aging biomarkers available to science. The participants reduced their biological age by an average of just over 3 years in 8 weeks. You have your chronological age, the number of years since you were born, but you also have a cellular age, your biological age, which reflects how your cells and tissues are actually functioning. Those two numbers can diverge significantly depending on how you live. This study demonstrated that the divergence can shift more rapidly than most people expect in the right direction when you give your body what it needs. The body was designed with extraordinary self-repair capacity. When you stop creating the conditions that undermine that capacity, the repair process activates naturally. Pigment, hair density, energy levels, mood stability, exercise recovery, and sleep quality all run on the same underlying biological systems. Fix those systems and the downstream effects often begin coming back online, sometimes modestly, sometimes more dramatically than you expected. The system is not dead. It has been suppressed. Your job is not to fight your hair. It is to make your body's internal environment hospitable to repair again. When you do that, the hair follows. The engine underneath everything, your mitochondria. Every single cell in your body, with the exception of red blood cells, contains tiny energy-producing structures called mitochondria. Some cells have hundreds of them, some have thousands. The mitochondria take what you eat, what you breathe, and even sunlight and red light exposure and convert all of it into ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the actual energy currency your cells use to perform every biological function. Hair follicles are extraordinarily energy-hungry structures. So are melanocytes, the cells responsible for producing your hair's pigment. Both depend entirely on mitochondria that are functioning at or near full capacity. When mitochondrial function begins to decline, 3 things happen simultaneously. ATP production drops, reactive oxygen species spike, and inflammation signaling increases. Research in which mitochondrial dysfunction was experimentally induced in animal models showed subjects going gray prematurely, not because pigment cells died of old age, but because they ran out of usable energy, and the biochemical environment surrounding them became too oxidative for normal function to continue. Think about the years in your own life when your hair started changing most noticeably. It is very likely those periods align with stretches when you were not sleeping adequately, were under significant stress, were not eating well, were not moving your body the way you used to, perhaps were drinking more, perhaps were spending more time in sedentary screen-based activities. That is not coincidence. That is not your imagination. That is your metabolism expressing itself on your scalp. When mitochondria struggle, hair growth slows, pigment fades, and you age faster from the inside. You often feel it before you see it. The afternoon energy crashes, the sluggish recovery from workouts that used to feel easy, the brain fog that was not there before, the abdominal weight that seems resistant to your usual efforts. These are the same root causes expressing themselves through different symptoms. Your hair is simply the version visible in your mirror. What is accelerating the process without you realizing it? Most people are accelerating this deterioration without realizing it through a cluster of habits that individually seem manageable but compound into serious biological consequences over time. Chronic sleep restriction is one of the most damaging. Running on 5 or 6 hours of sleep night after night, year after year, is not a sustainable productivity strategy. Sleep is when your hair follicles perform most of their repair work. It is when your stress hormone cortisol resets toward baseline. It is when critical growth signals, including human growth hormone, are released. Cutting your sleep cuts your hair's opportunity to recover and rebuild. Insufficient protein intake is another significant driver. Hair is constructed almost entirely from protein. If you are not consuming somewhere between zero point 0.7 and 1.0 grams of protein per pound of your ideal body weight daily, your hair follicles are competing directly with your muscle mass, your immune system, and your gut lining for the same pool of amino acids. The follicles will lose that competition every time because they are not a survival priority. Aggressive fasting without adequate recovery and protein intake can become counterproductive. Fasting is a genuine biological stressor. When done strategically with proper refueling, it can be beneficial. But when layered on top of poor sleep, chronic psychological stress, and inadequate protein, extended daily fasting raises cortisol further and signals the body to shut down non-essential systems. Hair is one of the first to go. Overtraining without adequate recovery amplifies the same problem. Exercise without sufficient sleep, nutrition, and rest days does not build the body up. It creates a stress load the body cannot resolve, and the downstream effects show up in exactly the places you least want them to. Smoking, vaping, and heavy alcohol consumption each represent a direct assault on follicle blood flow and oxidative burden. A sedentary lifestyle, sitting for 9 or more hours per day, independently drives chronic inflammation through mechanisms that have led researchers to describe it as the new smoking. Even brief movement breaks, a 5-minute walk every hour, can meaningfully shift these inflammatory markers. And then there is the largest driver of all, living in chronic low-grade psychological stress so persistent and so familiar that it has stopped feeling like stress. You have adapted to a baseline level of cortisol elevation that you no longer consciously register because it has simply become your normal. That silent chronic stress is showing up on your scalp in real time, documented in the hair shaft research described earlier. None of these factors is catastrophic in isolation, but stacked together and sustained over a decade, your hair becomes the receipt for all of it. The 4-step protocol, here is what you actually do about it. 4 steps, none of them extreme, all of them powerful when applied consistently and layered together. Step 1. Fix your sleep. First, this is not optional, and it is not something you address last. It is the foundation everything else builds on. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of total sleep. If you track your sleep with a device, target approximately 90 minutes of combined deep sleep and REM sleep per night. The conditions that support this include not eating for at least 3 hours before bed, keeping your bedroom dark and cool at around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, using a sleep mask or blackout curtains if needed, and breathing through your nose rather than your mouth during sleep. On the nutritional side, magnesium glycinate at around 300 to 400 milligrams daily is one of the most evidence-supported supplements for calming the sympathetic nervous system and improving sleep quality. Pairing it with 3 grams of glycine daily has been shown in clinical trials to improve sleep depth and reduce nighttime cortisol spikes. Getting natural sunlight exposure within the first 30 minutes of waking also plays an important role in regulating circadian rhythm and improving sleep quality at night. Step 2. Lower your oxidative load. Reduce or eliminate smoking, vaping, and heavy alcohol consumption. These create direct oxidative damage to follicle tissue. Beyond that, daily walking outdoors, drinking adequate high-quality water with electrolytes, and eating primarily whole single-ingredient foods all work together to lower the oxidative burden your cells are carrying. Processed foods with lengthy ingredient lists drive oxidative stress and inflammation. Whole foods, proteins, vegetables, and quality fats do not. Stopping constant snacking and consolidating intake into 2 or 3 protein-focused meals daily further reduces the oxidative load and supports more stable hormonal signaling throughout the day. Step 3. Protect your mitochondria. Short resistance training sessions, even 20 minutes twice a week, are among the most potent stimuli available for improving mitochondrial function. Combining this with adequate protein intake regular sunlight exposure, and high-quality creatine at 5 to 10 grams daily creates a meaningful stack for mitochondrial support and cellular energy production. Many of the sleep and nutrition habits described above also directly support mitochondrial health, which is why these steps compound on each other rather than working in isolation. Step 4. Master your cortisol. Your cortisol management may be the most important long-term lever of all. 5 to 10 minutes of slow nasal breathing daily, breathing in through the nose for 4 counts, holding for 4 counts, and exhaling through the nose for 4 counts activates the parasympathetic nervous system and directly lowers cortisol in measurable ways. Getting outside in natural light and spending time in natural environments consistently reduces stress hormone levels through pathways that indoor environments simply cannot replicate. Grounding, placing bare feet directly on grass, sand, or soil, has preliminary research support for reducing inflammatory and stress markers as well. The missing piece most people overlook. There is one additional factor that drives hair thinning and graying that most people never address because most doctors never test for it adequately. Vitamin D deficiency affects roughly 40% of American adults. Standard reference ranges often flag deficiency only at levels below 30 nanograms per milliliter, but optimal function for hair follicles and mitochondria appears to require levels closer to 60 or above. Many people sitting at 40 or 45 on their test results are told they are fine when their biology is telling a different story. Your hair follicles contain vitamin D receptors. The follicle uses vitamin D as part of the biological signaling that initiates the active growth phase of the hair cycle. When vitamin D is insufficient, follicles struggle to enter and maintain that growth phase. Hair becomes thinner, sheds more readily, grows back more slowly, and becomes more vulnerable to premature graying. Research published in the journal Skin Pharmacology and Physiology found lower vitamin D levels in women experiencing significant hair shedding. Separate research has demonstrated the same association in women with female pattern hair loss and in men with alopecia. If you have been implementing improved sleep, nutrition, stress management, and exercise, but hair loss or graying is continuing or accelerating, getting your vitamin D levels tested should be an immediate next step. This may be the missing piece sitting in plain sight. Vitamin D also matters far beyond hair. Your mitochondria depend on it. Your immune system depends on it. Your bones, your mood, your stress response, and your recovery capacity all depend on it. When vitamin D remains chronically low, your body begins reallocating resources away from non-essential systems in exactly the pattern described throughout this lesson. The form matters. Vitamin D3 is the biologically active form your body can use most effectively. Pairing it with vitamin K2 ensures that the calcium absorption vitamin D promotes goes where you want it, into bones and teeth, rather than accumulating in arteries and soft tissue where it creates problems. This combination represents one of the most straightforward foundational upgrades available for healthy aging, energy, stress adaptation, and the systems underlying healthy hair growth. The bottom line: if your hair is thinning or going gray, your body may not be broken, it may simply be depleted. What you are seeing in the mirror is not necessarily the inevitable progression of your genetic destiny. It may be your body communicating that it needs recovery, that the systems supporting cellular repair, pigment production, and follicle growth have been suppressed by a combination of stressors that can be addressed. The research is clear on several points that were not clear even a decade ago. Biological age can shift meaningfully in a matter of weeks when the right inputs are provided. Pigment can return to hairs that have gone gray when stress decreases. Mitochondrial function can improve with targeted lifestyle changes. And follicle health responds to the same systems that govern your energy, your sleep, your inflammatory load, and your stress hormones. The 4 steps outlined here work together as a system. Sleep gives your follicles the recovery window they need. Lowering oxidative load reduces the internal bleaching process driving graying. Protecting mitochondria restores the energy supply that pigment cells depend on. And managing cortisol removes the signal telling your body to redirect resources away from your hair. These are not dramatic interventions. They are the conditions your biology was designed to operate within. Remove the interference and your body will do what it was built to do. Share this with someone you believe it could genuinely help. Your hair changing may not just be about aging, it may be your body asking for recovery.